Hi, I'm Krutika, and today's conversation is with Bansi. Imagine meeting someone online, falling head over heels in love, getting married, and then watching it all unravel in just a few short years. Navigating a post married life abroad and succumbing to the traditional expectations of a daughter in law in an Indian household brings with it its own challenges. But to then contend with inappropriate remarks about her appearance coupled with a cheating husband was the final straw that resulted in Bansi's decision to separate and move back to the UK. But navigating divorce in an Indian community carries stigma, judgement, and a misunderstanding which continued to make this a taboo topic. So in this conversation, we unpack all of the above to share Bansi's journey of rediscovering herself. Hi Bansi, so great to have you today on my podcast. How are you?
Good, thank you. Thanks for having me.
You were just telling me before I hit the record button that you're going away to Budapest. Are you looking forward to that?
Oh, I'm so excited. I'm not excited about the packing, but I've got like jam-packed schedule, so it'll be really fun.
I haven't been to Budapest actually, so you must let me know what that's like once you come back. So we'll get stuck straight into it. And I know we're going to come on to discuss through this conversation a bit of a taboo topic, I guess, in the Indian community around divorce. And so we will come on to that. But just to get a bit of an introduction, I mean, you obviously grew up in an Indian household. You know, were there certain values and traditions that really shaped who you are today?
Yeah, I think we grew up in a joint family, so that was really nice, and I think we had a very fun, lively household. Growing up with three older sisters as well, it wasn't easy. I mean, they literally are like having mums. My parents raised me pretty well. I think they weren't so cultural and traditional. There were some aspects, but I think my dad's work ethic and my mum's sacrifices and strength, I think that's what kind of shaped me today into everything that I've experienced. It's kind of there in my brain. I hear my dad's voice all the time, like with his little one-liners and stuff.
You mentioned your sisters and how they're all mother-like figures in your life. And I know they also got married at a young age. Would you say that before you got married, you had certain visions and expectations of what you might do and achieve in your future?
I've always been a little bit different to them. I think I've never wanted to get married so early. They were married by 23, they were engaged by 21. And I guess because of the vast age difference between us, it was so different when I was like around that age. I, at 21, couldn't even tell you which direction my life was going in. So I was quite lucky that I did have an open relationship with my parents, probably more so than my sisters. And they didn't really pressure me into marriage. They just let me do my own thing. I do feel like it took me maybe a lot longer than my sisters to figure out what I wanted out of life. I mean, got married when I was 25. So I guess some people can say that is quite early and quite young.
How did you and your ex sort of meet? Could you tell us a little bit about that journey?
Funny story, we met on Tinder. As you do nowadays. My oldest sister was living in Chicago, and me and my sister, my second sister, we went to visit her with like my mom and my dad, and my brother-in-law, my nephews. I was 23. I think I finished uni and, in this new era of like, what the hell am I going to do with my life? And downloaded Tinder and was, talking to a few guys, and my sister was like swiping right with me and left and right. Then, yeah, I met my ex. We went on a few dates, met him towards the end of my trip. And then I came home, we kept in contact. We were in a long distance relationship for 2.5 years. And then I wouldn't say pressure in the community led us to it, but when parents meet naturally in the Indian community, they start getting excited and start planning things. And one thing led to another, and we were married like 2 years later, 2018.
I just want to circle back to a few things that you've mentioned there. Do you think the process of online dating makes things easier to meet a prospective partner?
No, I think quite the opposite. It's so difficult because you know who you are, you know your values, you know what you bring to the table, but it's so hard to, on like a one-page profile, like how are you supposed to know It's not until you like meet up with the person, you talk to them over the phone. And some people just unfortunately aren't serious. And I think it's really hard for people to commit. I think it's just, oh, if this conversation dies, I'll just keep swiping and find somebody else. And it's just a constant, it's like window shopping, basically.
The other thing I wanted to touch on is obviously you were abroad at the time as well. Were you a little bit nervous about meeting someone abroad and getting serious? Because obviously that ultimately, if things did get serious, you would have to move to another country, let's say.
My sister lived there. And obviously, my sisters were the ones that were like, oh, let's see what Indian boys are on Tinder kind of thing. We agreed to meet at a local Starbucks, like 10 minutes from my sister's house. It was really funny because my sister had this huge 7-seater. Like in America, you know how everything is huge. So it was me, my 2 sisters, and my 2 brother-in-laws. They all came to drop me. So I felt safe. I felt like I had, that like protection because I was still young, like going into a coffee shop to meet a complete stranger. And I remember my phone didn't work. I didn't have Wi-Fi. So as soon as I got into Starbucks, I connected my Wi-Fi just in case, gave my sisters a thumbs up. So I saw him another like 2 or 3 times after that. And it was a constant, like, because he used to work night. So it was, I saw him and then we were on the phone all night. And then I saw him the next day and we were on the phone all night. So it was quick, but it was a good investment of time that we spent getting to know each other. And I think with long distance, it may feel quick, but you spend so much time doing nothing but talking to each other. So feels like you know the person. I didn't really think about the prospect of moving and how it would be until like months and months later. And then when I actually stepped off the plane after booking a one-way ticket, that was a bittersweet moment, I think.
Now, once you got married, obviously, when we think about marriage, we think of it as a lifelong commitment. Obviously, you ultimately ended up getting divorced. Did you feel when you were in the midst of the marriage that there were pressures or expectations to really make this relationship work simply because you didn't want the alternative, which would be divorce if it didn't work?
I think obviously seeing my sisters, they were in like 10, 15-year long marriages. It was a bit naive of me to think, oh, you get married, you stay married, and that's it. You have kids, you buy a house. But also I knew the representation of daughter-in-laws in our culture. And at first, I was like, yeah, it'll be okay. But I think as time went on, I kind of became a bit more of a yes man. And I just did everything that was asked of me. And I was trying to be a good daughter-in-law. And the more I did, the more expectations kept increasing. And slowly I felt like the real me was buried so deep down that I didn't actually recognize who I was because I was doing so much for other people. And being in a country away from your family, it's really hard because if my parents were nearby, I could go to my parents' house, recharge a bit, come back, look at it with a fresh set of eyes, and that would have helped. I had these expectations of myself and I wanted to make my parents proud, wanted to be this amazing person. It was more, I think, from me than anything else. I think it was internal that I had to be the best.
It takes a lot of courage and bravery to recognize a situation and realize that a part of you is changing when you're in a situation that isn't necessarily true to your values or what you want in life. You've been very candid sharing that some of the things were expectations that you were putting on yourself, and that's the challenge with individuals, right? Like we often put expectations on ourselves because we feel like, oh, if we take this particular route or we make this particular decision, family or society might say something or think otherwise. It's all in our head. And there's this thing I've read about, which is the spotlight effect, that everyone's living their lives fixating on the fact that everyone around them is thinking about them and their decisions. But
Yeah,
truly, everyone's too fixated on themselves. They're just spotlighting themselves.
I agree with that. I 100% agree with that. But I feel like within this particular family, the spotlight was in fact on me. I mean, I'm not exactly a size 0, perfect looking woman. No, like I'm a bit bigger. I have like acne and like my skin isn't perfect. So I felt so much pressure to be the expectation of them because I didn't look like the expectation of them. And I only realized that obviously later on in life, and I felt so judged all the time. I used to hear comments like, "Oh, what's that on your skin?" "It's my acne. I'm going through it right now. Leave me alone." Or "Your makeup doesn't look great today," or "Your haircut's not great." It was that, I think that made everything harder.
Firstly, I'm so sorry you had to go through that. Nobody should have to deal with inappropriate remarks about their appearance or their weight. And I think those sorts of inappropriate comments are so rife in the Indian community. And people really need to be mindful of their words, because their words really do affect an individual's mental state. But what I'm so proud of is how you came to that realization that that was not okay. I kind of wanted to touch on something you mentioned about how moving to another country, if you had your family around, and I know you mentioned your sister was there, but for example, if your parents were around, you would have that escapism to maybe just pop over, get a bit of respite from whatever it was that you were dealing with. What did you miss in particular about the UK and being so far away from home when you were in the midst of all of this?
I think obviously I missed my family. My sister was in Chicago, but my brother-in-law got a job, so then they moved to Seattle. Because we were so newly married, I didn't drive. I didn't have my own bank account. I didn't have any friends. So everybody would go off to work and I would sort of kind of be left alone. I mean, FaceTime is great, but it's hard because I feel like it makes you miss them even more. I remember I had my suitcases in the basement and I hadn't opened them for a few months because it was still summer, and I know I had a suitcase full of like my jackets. I remember when everybody went to work one day, I went in the basement and opened my suitcases, and I think for about an hour and a half, I just sat there crying because as soon as I opened the suitcase, it smelled like home. I would like close the suitcase and then every so often I'd go down and smell it again. And that was kind of what I used to cope. I just missed the comfort of having people who know you. My mum's Indian tea in the morning. I stopped drinking Indian tea because their masala was a bit different. So I would drink coffee. It was little things. Baked beans. I missed baked beans. Just the Snickers, the Kit Kat. It tastes so different. So yeah, I think it was just little things.
You've obviously shared a little bit of insight into the expectations that were put upon you being a daughter-in-law, some of the inappropriate remarks. Was there a particular moment that really pushed you over and you thought, right, you know what, this is not working out? Or was it a culmination of multiple moments that led you to a decision that this has got to be the end of this relationship or this situation?
I don't ever think it was me who fully decided to end things. I think the fact that my husband at the time cheated on me was the deciding factor of, okay, this is the end. But again, like the good daughter-in-law, the good daughter in me wanted to still make it work. I was like, let's go to couples counseling. Let's try and fix it. Because I think in our culture, we're taught that you can fix things rather than just ending things. But do you know what? Sometimes you just can't fix it. No matter what you do, you cannot make somebody want to be with you. And unfortunately, I had to learn that the hard way. I am not proud of it, but I did beg and plead and be like, let's try, let's please try. But ultimately, I had to realize that it can't be me that's carrying the relationship. It can't be just me. For a while, I tortured myself into dissecting every single moment of the last 4 years of being married and trying to figure out what happened. But sometimes you're just not going to know what's going on in somebody's mind. I am really, really thankful for my family and friends, because there are a lot of women who in our culture are shunned for being divorced. They're not welcomed home with open arms. I do feel tremendously lucky that I had support from my sisters and my parents and my friends in Chicago. They were literally the pillars of strength.
Coming back and being a divorcee now, how have you navigated those conversations with people outside of your immediate circle? Divorce is one of those things that just isn't widely spoken about. People judge. And
especially in our culture.
Especially in our culture, exactly. So what were you worried about people's reactions?
I kind of felt like people would be like, she moved there and you got married so young. And well, that's what you kind of get for marrying somebody in another like I thought people were going to be like, well, that's what you get, I told you so kind of thing. But I felt like I had to really overshare and over explain things at first, which is a problem I have. But now I feel like, what, it's okay to either say nothing or to say little, and not to allow so much of your life to be exposed and people to have access to it. I got divorced, but I'm okay. I'm moving on. I'm living my life. I remember that year when I got back, some of our cousins came to visit my sister's house, and it was the first time I would have had to say out loud to external family. I developed such social anxiety. If we were having like a gathering at my sister's house, I would be upstairs. I literally couldn't face it.
So you mentioned that you had social anxiety. When an individual experiences something as traumatic as this, because divorce is a traumatic process, you're grieving the loss of a relationship, a future you believed would materialize that didn't. How has this affected you sort of physically, emotionally? And what have you learned through this process as well about yourself?
Even though time does help a lot, you are mourning that person, that relationship, that closeness, even the bad things, the good things. You're mourning inside jokes, songs, smells. It takes so much energy. And I wasn't myself for a very long time. And I don't think people understand that. I think people expect you to bounce back. They would say things like, oh, you're still so young. They would say things like, such a good thing you didn't have children. I know that they're trying to help, but I think in that moment, people just want to be like, you know what, you're doing great. What can I help you with? How can I support you? What do you need? It takes so much to rewire your brain into not having this person in your life. I still have days where I'm blinded by flashbacks, and certain dates will pop up and you think about it, memories or songs. I don't want to be like this forever. It was with the help of a lot of coping strategies and therapy that I was able to finally come out of it the other side.
Just sort of thinking with what you've been through, I feel like you've alluded to this through the conversation anyway, but I'll ask it. Has it sort of changed you as a person, is my first point, but also has it changed your views on love and marriage and relationships more generally?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like I'm a lot more open. Dating in your 30s was definitely really hard. You've got this constant internal clock that's ticking inside of you. Before I turned 30, I was like, okay, so if I meet somebody at 32, I'll date them for 2 years and then we'll get married again and then we'll have kids. I'll be 38, 39. Oh my God, will I have kids? It's hard because when I would tell people that I'm dating, or like not even dating, like you've matched with somebody on Hinge or something, and you're like, okay, yeah, this is what I do. Same questions. What do you do? Where are you from? How long have you been on the dating app? How long have you been single? Same questions over and over again. And I'm a very honest person, so I have to be like, okay, well, I'm divorced. Next thing you know, you go back on the app and they're gone. And I just wish more people would just say, that's not what I'm looking for.
So is it harder now in the dating game with the label divorcee?
I think it depends, because boys would have an issue with it, but real men, they don't really care. They look at the person. I have been dating somebody for 6 months and we've spoken about it at great lengths. It makes me a bit emotional because I can fully be who I am, and the old parts of me that was somewhere else, they're now here, and I'm a better version of it, I think.
So it feels like you're still holding on to the hope of love and
Yeah.
relationships, and this experience hasn't totally dampened or darkened that aspect.
A good friend of mine in Chicago, she was like my mum in Chicago. Whenever I was sick, she would take me to the doctor, and her name's Michelle, and she was one of the best people I've ever met. She said something to me when I was going through like my separation and my divorce, and she said, "Don't let this make you bitter." I never did. I never let it, because of that, I feel like I was able to find love again. I think that is what propelled me to where I am now.
Good girl, Michelle, for sharing those words of wisdom. So shout out to Michelle for that. Don't let this leave you bitter, which is, wise words there. Just to sort of wrap up on our conversation, Bansi, what would your advice be to women who feel trapped in a situation, perhaps similar to yours, and they're potentially considering a separation or a divorce, but are feeling trapped because of expectations, whether it's their own or societal or cultural expectations?
Don't be afraid to leave, and don't beg. It's tough. It's like a dark cloud over you for months and months and months and months. But then one day there's a flicker of sun and you can get through it. It's so important to put yourself first, and therapy, can't sing enough praises about therapy. Finding the right therapist. I had 4 therapists along the last couple of years, and it wasn't until last February that I finally felt I don't need therapy anymore. It helped me, get through certain things that maybe you can't speak to people about. There's always going to be a side of you that nobody ever knows. So sometimes talking to somebody who doesn't really know you can help. So important to do what you love and to take time out for yourself. Even though life gets so busy and you're working, 5 minutes a day to just journal. Journaling really helped me. I have a whole book. I used to write like 3-4 times a day. Anything, any thoughts, just write them down, jot them down, doodle them. And once you reach the acceptance phase of everything that you've been through, it's onwards and upwards from there. And whatever will be, will be.
That is some really, really great advice. Thank you so much for sharing that. And also for sharing about therapy, because that's another taboo topic in the Indian community. We could do a whole separate episode, I suppose, on that. Final question that I ask all my guests then is, what journey are you on right now?
I think I'm on a journey of me. I think I have realized that I am the most important person in my life. I am the one that has gotten me through a lot of things with the help of, family and friends and support. Never forget that. It's me. I have to get myself up and out every morning, and it's only me that has to live this life that's mine. So I'm okay now by putting me first, not tolerating things that I'm uncomfortable with, setting boundaries and not doing things that I don't want to do. It's easier said than done sometimes because I am a people pleaser. Acknowledging what's going on inside your heart, inside your brain, and just me.
Journey of me. That is such a fantastic way to end this conversation. I cannot thank you enough for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Journeys with Krutika. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate and share. I'd love for you to hit the follow button wherever you get your podcast so you never miss an episode. And if you have a journey that you want to share, email me at journeyswithkrutika@gmail.com or reach out via my socials. I'm on Instagram and TikTok. Just search Journeys with Krutika, because your journey is extraordinary.